is going to be a sort of two-way conversation rather than me just standing here lecturing at you and telling you what I think. Very interested what you think. And thank you for the kind intro and the kind words. And you said it's great to have me. Jury's out on that, I think, at the moment. We'll see. We'll see. So I'm Steve Sands. I chair the ISST, which is one of around about 50 specialist groups of BCS. I've been doing that for about 4 years now, and life is changing right now for me because I'm in the process of retiring. So I'm going to get some hints and tips from you a little later. Process of winding down. I think by this time next month I will have finished. My wife might have persuaded me to a Fortin motorhome. That's what she wanted to do at the moment. Yeah, is that all right? Yeah. Brilliant. Approved. Okay, and I'll come and visit Shropshire a bit more because I haven't been around Shropshire, much of Shropshire. Occasionally I pop into Telford, occasionally to Shrewsbury or Shrewsbury or whichever it is. Which is it? Shrewsbury. Ah, there we go. So occasionally I drop into Shropshire, but I don't know the place very well. And I have to say, I am blown away by this for an AGM and committee. I think you guys you've got a great future, and you've got a great committee, you've got a great branch. I'm quite close to the guy who runs I think it's the North Staffordshire group branch. And I think you would love this kind of setup, particularly meeting in a pub, because they meet at the university. That sounds good. Brilliant, thank you. So this is kind of what I'm going to talk about. It's not necessarily in that order. It's not even necessarily going to cover all the points. It's probably almost definitely not going to cover everything that was on the Eventbrite page. But we might have a conversation around some of that. I hope we do. So if we could just slip on one slide. And I'll bore you a little bit with who I am and how I got into this kind of game. Just before I start, how many folks in here are sort of actively involved in doing information security or cyber security? Oh, yes, yes. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so we're going to get a great conversation, I think. And I hope that maybe we can get a few more of you involved and interested in it. Would it be reasonable for me to assume that there's some sort of HMRC place around here? Where is it? Whereabouts is it? Telford. Oh, it's in Telford. Yeah. Right, okay.
Those beautiful big blue buildings.
I'll look out for them. So I started in IT, I suppose, in technology, when I was quite a lad, 1977-ish. And I started out as a BT apprentice. I think it was the post office at that time. And my old man had been in the post office telephones. And he said, it's not a bad job, it's a job for life. You get a pension at the end of it, you won't get rich, but you'll enjoy it if you're into techie stuff. So I thought that sounds all right. So I did the 3-year bit there, then I became a TO. I was a TO on electronic stuff. Electronic exchange, first generation really of electronic exchange. Someone's nodding here.
Yeah, Systemex, yeah.
But before that.
Oh, right.
Before that. Yeah. Before that, there was a branch of electronic exchange before that called TXT4.
Right.
And I worked on TXT4 for a while. Then I went into Systemex and XT10 and all that good stuff. And then I moved to Stone, which is in Staffordshire, just up the road. And worked in training there, so I became an instructor, worked there in training, became a lecturer, became some sort of portfolio manager. I'm not really quite sure what the job meant, or just one of the job titles. You kind of go, so what do I do? All sorts of things. But it was great. And part of that took me into information security stuff. So I put together a training centre within BT for firewalls, for checkpoint stuff. So I had to go away and learn all about firewall checkpoint software. Ended up having to do the checkpoint certificate. They sent to Dallas, of all places, for one day. For one day to do a little exam. Ostensibly there was a training course for it, but he didn't really go through the training course. He just we just chatted for half a day. And they said, we better get this exam thing out of the way. So I sat and did an exam with my colleague who was with me, and then we flew home. It was brilliant. And then we moved into BT, hooked up with one of the big PKI suppliers at the time, and I got into digital certificates and SSL and TLS and all of that good stuff. And that really took me into some of the groundwork, if you like, for information security stuff that we know and love and still exists today. I've been working on ever since in one way or another. About 20 years and 8.5 months ago, I moved into this little organisation called Synectic Solutions, and nobody's ever heard of Synectic Solutions. Anyone here heard of you? Where do you work?
I work here called Genus now, but I've interviewed for a Synectic once.
I'm sorry about that. I wasn't on the panel, was I?
About 10 years ago.
Okay, all right. So I work for a little organisation. There were less than 100 people when I joined 20 years ago, and they are probably the largest fraud prevention agency in the UK that nobody's ever heard of. So everyone's heard of Experian. Synectic Solutions has probably got more fraud data than pretty much all of the other ones put together. So I kicked off doing project management stuff, pre-sales stuff, IT management stuff. Small company, you end up doing a bit of everything, which is great fun, but probably not great for, they're not in a career in a particular direction. But they didn't have an information security manager at the time. And I kind of said to them, all of our clients are sending us these questionnaires, they're all banks and building societies, insurance companies, and we're getting inundated with these questionnaires. So there was a family-owned business run by Kevin and Carol Shannon. And Kevin said to me, so what do you think we should do? I said, well, the first thing we need to do is appoint someone to do the job. And then probably, I think most of our customers are going to be interested in getting 27001, which is the standard information security management system. So I talked him into it, and he said, yeah, okay, do what you need to do. I don't think he really knew what he was asking for, what was going to be involved, or how that was going to ripple through the organisation over the months and years that followed. But we got that in 2011, I think, and we've maintained it all the way since. And that kind of took me into management systems for information security, and then eventually I joined BCS. So that's kind of potted history of me. I've got one more slide on me, and then I promise to move on. When people join BCS, they get invited to a sort of webinar thing in an evening to tell them all about the good things that BCS do. And someone said, "Oh, Steve, can you come do one of these? We normally like 3 experienced members who've been around for a while to come and talk to us." So I just put this single slide together to try and talk people through where I started. It actually started on Shropshire. If anyone knows anything about telephone systems, that was electromechanical stuff. So that's where I started. This is the TXE4 main control unit. Then moved into the checkpoint stuff. So there's firewall rule base. Did some PKI stuff. So an Alison Bob mug here from a guy called Professor Bill Buchanan up at Napier University. And they're much coveted, these things, Alison Bob mugs. So I won't even allow my wife to put it in the dishwasher. Really quite proud of it. So I got into PKI certificates, then did that move into Synectics. We've got, well, that's a conservative number, 350 million records. There's a good deal more than that in our national SIRA fraud prevention database. So pretty much any time you folks apply for any financial product or service, your data is going to wash in through that database to see whether you've got any fraud history or whether there's any reason that the bank or the building society or the lender might want to consider you potentially fraudulent and do some investigation before they say, yeah, you can have a credit card, you can have a loan, you can have whatever it is. And we run another system as well, which is very similar, but we do it for government. So we run a system for Cabinet Office called the NFI, the National Fraud Initiative, and we've got a similar sort of chunk of data sitting in there. And every local authority and quite a number of central government agencies provide data to that thing as well. And we run a major exercise once every 2 years, but we run a lot of real-time stuff these days as well. So as people are applying for benefits or whatever it is, they're watching through the enterprise system to see whether or not they're doing something else that might conflict with whatever they're asking for, or they're an fraudster or whatever it is. So there's quite a bit going on. Having sort of appointed myself as the Synaptics Chief Information Security Officer, they didn't have one, they didn't really know that they needed one, and I said, well, it's a good idea to have one, why don't you just choose me, because I'm here. So in the same way as you guys appointed yourself to various positions on the committee, I can see that too. So I became their first CISO, and not long after that I joined BCS and got involved in the ISSG, having been involved in a couple of other organisations that were doing similar things, but not doing them very well. So I thought I'd give BCS a go, and here I am still doing it. So something must have been right. And I must admit that BCS, so I've been doing chair of ISSG for about 4 years. I've been involved in all sorts of things that just simply would not have been possible had I not joined BCS and had I not been active in BCS. Because for me, that's the key thing. If you're not active in your branch, your specialist group, whatever the organisation is, then you just kind of sit there and take what they give you. But you good folks are very much shaping what goes on in this branch and what you're interested in and what you want to do over the coming years, which for me is what BCS is all about. So I get called in for consultations, HMD consultations, typically media responses. So when there's a major crisis somewhere, seems to be every other week at the moment, quite often one or other of the news agencies will contact BCS for some comment, and they'll go out to a handful of us to say, what do we need to say about this? What's our position on this? We run a whole series of events and webinars throughout the year. They're all on the events page, same BCS events page that you guys use. And we've got some things that we're doing, particularly this year, focusing on like quantum and crypto, focusing on cloud, focusing on a whole variety of things that might be on a basis like, I can't remember. I also represent BCS on the BSI Standards Committee, IST 33 committee, that deals with all of 27,000 series standards. So it's great, it's brilliant. And I would not have been able to do any of that without some involvement in BCS. So it's been a really good journey. And I would thoroughly recommend anyone to get involved, but be active, get involved and do stuff, because that's really the way that the whole thing kind of comes to life. Thank you. But so you guys probably know all of this already. We've got about 72,000 members. We run lots and lots of events up and down the country. More and more of them are hybrid or online since COVID. We try and run our hybrid normally from the London office and get them online as well using Zoom, so that we can involve as many people across the UK and beyond as we possibly can and make the whole thing useful. BCS are currently represented in quite a number of countries. I didn't know it was that many. They've got about 50 odd special interest groups, or 6, and I believe about 50 odd branches too. And it's really pretty vibrant. Having said we've got 72,000 members, I have to say, that's a drop in the ocean in terms of the number of people who work in IT around the UK. And so the new CEO who came in just a couple of months ago, I think that's very firmly on her radar that she wants to see that number going up. We're a membership organisation. It exists because we have members, and obviously because they pay their membership fees. The more we have, the more we can do. And if we truly want to represent IT in the UK and across the world, then we need some money behind us and we need some people behind us, not necessarily in that order. So I'm really, really keen to see that number going up, and I'd like to see our membership in ISSG going up as well, because I truly believe that information security or cyber security, whichever you prefer to call it, should be on everybody's radar if you work in IT. It's, you know, it's the one thing that crosses just about every single aspect of it. Thank you. Cheers. So this is us, 50 odd SGs. For me, there's a bit of a debate going on at the moment as to whether, you know, everybody wants to call it cyber security. I remember going to an event down in London a number of years ago, and it was chaired by a guy called Don Randall. Anyone come across Don? He was the first CISO of the Bank of England. And I rode back up the river on one of the ferry things with him and a couple of other folks who were chatting about all sorts of things. And he said, you know, okay, so you're a CISO at the place that you were, that's information security CISO. You need to change your name to cyber. A, you'll get paid more, and B, it's the sexier name for what you do. And even now, I still kind of go, I don't really think that's true. I prefer the term information security. In fact, our SG has a debate about it just about every year. Should we change our name to, or inject somehow the cyber word into the name of our SG? And thus far, we've always said no, because we believe information security is a much broader discipline than cyber security, which, if you like, is the operational bit of doing information security. That's kind of my simplistic way of looking at it. But what was interesting was that we were founded in 1983, so we've been going 40 years. We had a huge celebration a year or so ago. We got a couple of the original founders of the group to come to London and spend the day with us. And I remember Phil Phillips, who was one of the founding chairs. I think he was the vice chair initially. David Lindsay founded the thing. He was the first chairman. Phil took over from him, and he said, you know, back in the day that I was doing this, there was only really banks and government had computer systems, back in '83 or whatever. And he said, we didn't need to worry too much about them because they were in big rooms in the basement and we didn't connect them to anything. So information security was a much simpler thing to do. But he said these things here that they came up with, CI and A, are still as relevant today as they ever were. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability are still as relevant here and now as they've ever been. And I always still go back to those three things. And it's interesting because availability, I think, has always been a bit of a poor relation. And even in my business, you know, a number of years ago, availability was considered to be an IT operational matter. It's not really the security guy. You know, don't come asking me questions about downtime and availability stuff, because that's my problem. And I think what we're seeing now, here today, is that availability is becoming much more interesting, not only to IT folks like us, but the general public, because we're starting to notice that things are really, we're having problems with systems going down. I think we might have slides to talk about a few of them. But availability, I've seen, whilst the data, certainly from my perspective at Selecting Solutions, confidentiality is probably still at the top of the stack. Because from a reputational perspective, we lose, you know, 350 million records. No, we're not in a great place. Not in a great place. There'll be a few banks falling out with us. Availability, not so important to us, although some of the biggest banks in the country, tier 1 banks, will get upset with us if they can't do their fraud checks. Now, the world won't stop turning, but they will be upset with it. And the longer that goes on, the worse it gets. And that's the thing that I think is often missing in the debate these days, is that we lose context. So people talk about information or cyber security, and they fail to appreciate the context of the organization and the context of the system that they're trying to protect, and work out what are our priorities. Is it confidentiality? Is it integrity? Is it availability? Is it all three? And possibly in what order do I really care about them? Yeah. So it's interesting times, I think, and probably right now it's the most interesting that I've seen, because all of a sudden, cybersecurity, information security is in the headlines just about every week for something or other. Brilliant, thank you. So, what is the problem? Who the hell would want to hack the UK, and why? Any ideas? Any thought? Yeah, loads of reasons. There's political reasons, there's nation state actors, there's organised crime gangs, there's insiders, there's all sorts of people who want to hack the UK. Usually it's because they're motivated by either power or money. So they want influence over organisations or our country, or they want to make money out of it. And typically because they want to make money out of it, isn't it? Because data these days is like gold or oil, whichever way you want to think of it. But it's what keeps everything moving these days. And this is why I come back to that question about, are we asking the right questions? And quite often I find, certainly at boardroom level, it's not that they're not interested, that's not fair, but it's not necessarily the most important thing on their radar, because they've got other things to consider. You know, they have to consider all business risk. And I think right now, because there have been so many cyber related incidents, if you will, it's coming up the stack on the boardroom risk register. A cyber incident or a information security incident, loss of data, is always our nightmare scenario. Where I work, it's the big, you know, it's the biggest risk that faces the company. But it would just stop them. We'd be dead in the water. I'm pretty sure. I doubt if we'd recovered from it. Having said that, Equifax, when they had their breach in, what was it, 2016, was massive. And but all it did in the longer term was knock a couple of points off the share price, and it all recovered, because of course they're serving consumers and businesses. And pretty much all of the consumers that they were serving, well, they didn't have a choice, their data went to Equifax anyway, and they just carried on. What they did do, though, was they made massive improvements to their security posture as a result of that, and made a massive promise that it would never happen again. And touch wood and all that, it hasn't. They've invested heavily, and we work really closely with them, and I know from personal experience that they drive it really hard, they're really hard. So lots of stuff going on. I think sometimes we lose sight of that context bit, the context of the organisation and the context of the data and the context of the system, and we sometimes fail to work out what the most important things are in terms of risk. So for us, it's confidentiality. For JLR, maybe less so right now. For Marks and Spencer's, maybe less so right now. You know, they're pretty much back to normal. But bloody hell.
They're not. They're my client.
They're your client. They're pretty much not back to normal. Outwardly facing, they've just about recovered all of their services, haven't they? No. As far as the public's concerned. No, are they still doing click and collect and all that? Or
still doing stock control by paper.
Pen and paper.
Yeah.
And all of that's the hidden thing, isn't it? And the cost to the business to try and recover all of that stuff. I mean, we saw it a few years ago with the London ambulance service. They lost their systems and reverted to pen and paper, didn't they? And it was an absolute nightmare. Mm-hmm. And we think, well, our organisations and our boards sometimes think it's as simple as plugging in an IT system and it'll never fail. I'm part of working group looking at availability at the moment, specifically availability, and promoting the availability problem. So a couple of characters run this group. Ed Steinberg, who's a professor and Jill Rennieman, who is head of ICL, and they run this thing for the BCS IT Leaders Forum. And they're really trying to promote this idea of availability being much more important than anyone has ever been entitled before. It is such an important thing because when systems go down, very quickly we see the effects of it. And it's happening all the time. It's a difficult thing. This little thing here, KNP, anyone heard of them? They were a sorry? Nice old. Yeah,
Northampton.
that's right. Do you know how old the company was?
Quite old.
I think it was 158 years old,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And the company went bump. It could not survive after an attack.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's that serious. You're a transport company for crying out loud. It was a password issue. It was a password issue. Yeah. And I'll mention it again, I'm sure. Sometimes it's about doing the basic stuff right before you get deeply embedded in buying loads of fancy tools. Organisations who don't do the basics right are fascinating for little cash. It's that. Barclays, interesting stat with Barclays, this ITLF group that I'm working with. We did a whole session, a whole sort of day's round table on availability affecting banking. And the conclusion was that banks' availability problems, so system outages, only 11% of them were attributable to some sort of cyber attack. Only 11%. Now, I think there's a couple of good reasons for that. Banks actually do information security stuff quite well. They're really good at it. I remember we were working nationwide back in 2009 when they lost a laptop. It's the first big publicised data loss at the time, 2009. I think HMRC lost a couple of discs.
DVDs and that.
Yeah. And there's all sorts of stories about what may or may not have actually happened there. But the nationwide thing was real. They lost a laptop and apparently it wasn't encrypted. Nobody encrypted laptops at that time, just one of the things. You know, it's inconceivable these days. But the headline was that they got fined £1 million by the FCA at the time. And that's what made them sit up and take notes. And that rippled around the whole banking community. And all of a sudden, the number of questionnaires and audits and reviews started hitting us because we got so much of their data. It was unbelievable. So, you know, we sort of live and breathe all of the ripples that come out of these things. I was listening to the news on the way in, on the way here today, and the JLR crisis is costing them £5 million a day. Massive numbers. More significant, almost more significant than that, is that their entire supply chain is at risk right now. And unless the government steps in and helps out in some way, some of those suppliers are going to go under. And restoring those suppliers once these folks get their systems back up and running and can start producing stuff again will be really difficult. So, you know, the knock-on effect from these things is insane. Totally insane.
Steve, what's your view on that in terms of government stepping in, i.e. taxpayer are stepping in to bail out JLR and their supply chain?
I'm going to do, my wife's a counsellor, and I'm going to do what she does and say, I don't know, what do you think? Because we are, yeah, we're all taxpayers. I think there's a view that you can take of these things that, you know, if the impact is going to be so wide and start hitting vast swathes of the population or society, then yeah, government has a place to help protect that, and spending taxpayers' money to preserve an entire industry probably isn't such a bad thing, but it depends on how much and how long.
Well, that's the key. You've now created a precedent,
Yeah.
and then you've taken responsibility away from those companies, and then they go off. Well, if it happens, you'll just that the government will bail us out,
Yeah.
rather than them, you know, using their own cyber insurance.
And that is one of the big problems that we've come on to in just a sec, is that organisations aren't taking this stuff seriously, and if they don't properly understand the risk at board level and assign the right amount of resource and money to protect and defend themselves. I mean, it leads on to the whole debate about ransomware, should you pay the ransom or not? We might come back to that in a minute as well. So, who is responsible for third parties? And it's not just third parties these days, it's fourth parties and fifth parties and down the line, you know. How many services that we use from our mobile phone are hosted in one of the three big cloud providers? Most of them. So if you're talking concentration risk, wow. And what happens to society if the masts that our phones connect to stop working, or all of the services provided by Amazon or Microsoft or Google?
Sorry, I'm laughing because we're in Adamston. Hopefully it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So you got your own resilience built in. Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, for us.
So third, fourth and fifth party risk is for me one of the biggest issues right now.
So going back to that point about AWS, Azure, Google, etc.
Yeah.
Right. And I always say this at work, but actually, because we heavily rely on those, AWS and Azure in particular.
Yeah.
But actually, if that went down, there's going to be bigger problems than the others. Because actually, most people will start going, I can't get onto Twitter, I can't get onto Facebook, I can't do this, I can't do that. Yeah, and they're going to be more concerned about that than the fact that actually, like, people are sending services like that.
That's a very fair point. And not only that, but all of the other organisations that are served by these three big super providers, if you will, are all going to say, well, there's nothing we could have done. Look, everyone's affected by it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a valid point.
But you've got to have resilience, though, haven't you? In the sense of, like, you are going to end up. Likelihood is any organisation is going to have a major outage at some stage, right? And there's nothing you can do to prevent that.
Yeah.
And so you've got to have your resilience of actually what's our plan B when everything else goes down.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that actually, like, organisations don't have monkeys about. You stick kind of thing like them.
Yeah.
It'll never happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do the risk.
Yeah.
exactly.
I'll stick my head in the sand and it won't be us, it'll be someone else, you know.
Do you know what happened with JLR though?
What's that?
Sorry?
JLR stuff.
I don't know, actually. Does anyone here know? Yeah.
It's like a
We know,
Steve
we know
Yeah.
it's a big- we know it's a big financial system, so we know it's-
I think that brings us on to another thing that I'll.
Can I just start for that? I didn't hear that.
Oh, sorry.
So,
I was just commenting about the general issue that at this point, they're not exposing what actually the vulnerability is. Because of, I mean, there's quite a lot of really interesting points made. I'm not an expert on the general supply chain. I just have individuals I know that work within that supply chain, and even the suppliers themselves don't actually know what the root cause of the cyber incident is. And a huge part of that is because they actually, this whole thing will lead into a massive investigation. So I know that there's this debate about whether you should pay or not pay, how you feel about it as a taxpayer. And I probably would say, I think that there are certainly going to be things that will roll, and there will be a massive investigation, regardless of whether the government steps in or not.
Yeah.
And it probably touches on a bit of a broader point, which is, I think the challenge that we have is different industries are regulated differently. So I come out of the financial services industry, and I can tell you that, I mean, there's lots of fines that are, given to individuals in personal capacities. The problem is that when you start looking at industries like automotive, their regulators haven't actually been on as tough.
Yeah.
So I agree with the point, we're all gonna get hacked at some point, do you have ops resilience, what are you doing about it? And
Absolutely.
we've had to attest, because of our financial conduct authority, to what we've done to meet their regulatory ops resilience impact.
Yeah.
Because it could be quite significant, and I think that's probably the wake up call with the Gerald thing. It's more around the fact that you have got different industries that are probably far more mature and progressed, like yourself, than other industries, and actually all vulnerable, because
Absolutely.
one weak link goes down in that whole chain of events that affects it.
Yeah,
And I,
yeah, oh, I discussed, sorry, you were trying
It's probably going to be controversial.
to, good,
So, do you think migrating to the cloud or the clouds is passing the buck? It's their mentality, because if you're a company and you're not on the cloud, then you're doing your own cybersecurity. Whereas if they're all sat on AWS,
yeah,
NHS, HMRC, TFL, everything, if AWS falls down, it's the end of the world.
and everyone could go, hey, it's not my fault,
So it's almost like passing the buck.
a little bit.
We're relying on a service provider, aren't we?
There's a number of different ways I think that you should look at the question. One is that AWS invest more in security than any single organization can. Second is that organizations often don't get the shared responsibility model properly and actually take responsibility for the bits of it that they should. So they assume all sorts of things. Depending on just how cyber savvy you are, I guess, or IT savvy you are. But organizations make all sorts of assumptions about, well, it's AWS, it's automatically all backed up. No, it's fully resilient because it's AWS. No, there's all of these kind of things I think going to be, how do I design my system to be resilient to information security, cyber security incidents and attacks, but also to failures, because stuff happens, things break.
I've seen a lot of assumptions made that AWS will look after that,
Yeah.
and no one ever asks.
Nobody
should
does
ever-
it. Yeah, and there's no audit into AWS, you take the SOC 2 report and that's as much as you're going to get. The rest of it is based on what's gone before, the history, the reputation, all the rest of it. But there's an awful lot of trust there that they're going to do and perform the way they said they should. So, yeah.
Laura, you were just saying about JLR and that nobody really knows what the crux of it is, like the supply chain. Isn't there a responsibility though that they should be sharing information for other businesses? And how are we going to be, how the other big organisations with the tech themselves?
Yeah, I was going to come on to that very point, but it's later on, but let's just do it now, because it's very valid. Now, the cyber information sharing platform is about to close down in November, I think it is, so that's operated by NTSC. And there isn't, anything to replace it. Now, CISP was never great anyway. Certain sectors have got a great information sharing system and platform, like FSI for the banks. And they will share in case of compromise, they'll share methodologies, they'll share all sorts of stuff within their closed sector. But thereby like the problem, because if you've got a JLR and they haven't got an equivalent information, sharing platform that they can all subscribe to, then these guys over here get hit. They don't share any information about what it is and how it happened. And next thing you know, they're getting hit. So in my view, so there's a new piece of legislation coming out. There'll be a bill introduced by the Parliament any day now. The cyber security resilience bill, and reporting will be part of that, but it really does only apply to the CNI sectors. I think there's 14 critical national infrastructure sectors, and it'll only apply to them. It will extend out to their third parties, their critical and important business services. But for the rest of it, well, it's down to the individual organisation to work out what's going to be for them. It comes back to the point you were making. And unless organisations are good at that stuff and take it seriously and have people on their board who take it seriously and recognise it for the risk that it is, then you're going to get a half-baked kind of approach to information security, and therefore you'll have to fail.
It's going to ask, I mean, when it comes to designing an IT security strategy, how much of it is about system design and how much of it is about human behaviour?
I couldn't give you the percentage split, but it's absolutely a bit of both. Absolutely, yeah. And one of the other things that we'll come on to, conscious of time, so we'll press on in a moment, just rather through some slides, but professionalisation within the IT sector is something that is sadly lacking. I've got a little badge on today, but put your eye open. So we got a CITP a while ago, and BCS has been really promoting it and saying, look, you know, the people who build, manage, operate, set policy around all of our IT system, which for God's sake drives every single thing that all of us do all day, every day. You know, it underpins the whole of society these days, IT stuff. So the people who architect it, who build it, who operate it, who set the policies, all of the stuff that needs to go on to make these things reliable and trustworthy, should be chartered, like doctors, like accountants. We should be able to, architects, we should be able to trust them to be operating ethically and professionally. So getting that chartership going within the IT industry is something that BCS is really pushing very hard on at the moment. Last year's president, a guy called Alistair Breville, was making that his theme for the year, and it's been successful. So they're getting an increasing number of registration applications coming through, and I think there's going to be rapid.
You've got to be careful though, because there has to be a credibility attached to it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems that we've had
Yes.
over the years, is that because we promote it with an HMRC, and you know damn well I promote it.
I was sitting there going, why haven't you done it?
It's like, but you know, especially when they keep changing, you know, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, the opposition I have is the fact that, but it's not that difficult to get, really, is it?
I think it's got a bit harder.
Yeah, if that's what you've got to get. It's got to be credible, otherwise people won't make the effort.
True. Yeah, and if it's not credible, it's not going to be trusted.
No, indeed.
And then it's worthless.
Yeah.
Can I go?
Yeah, true.
Society, our society has 5.3 million businesses, which are not the biggest.
Yeah.
We're not talking about government organisation or
SMEs, yeah.
the smaller element.
Yeah.
And they are being supported by groups of so-called IT professionals who just are not.
No.
And there's none until you grab the foot neck and say, right, you can't be an IT expert, you can't offer your services unless you have some sort of credibility. Yeah. Right, and exactly the same when she's small accountants. They all that.
It's a bit like
It's got to be done by God.
it's a bit like getting your gas boiler service.
Yeah.
You know, you need to go through it. It used to be called business gas safe now, but you know, they need to be registered and qualified and maintain that status, if you will. And I think my hope is that CITP will gain in credibility, will gain in understanding as to what it stands for, and more people go for it, and there is a requirement to keep it up to date. So it's not just get it now and then keep it for the rest of
Yeah, they're really old competence, so
Yeah.
there is no regard, there's no need for that at all. And that's the problem.
Sorry.
I think what's really important, what's going to say, is combination of not only thinking about understanding what is the cause of the cyber incident, which I agree, unfortunately, I don't think will ever 100% be truly clear. And part of that's got to do with all the ways in which the insurance and the legal kind of stuff happens. I think exactly to your point, but in smaller communities get shared, but you never ever get validate. The one thing that I think, I don't know if most people know this, but the managed service provider, and I don't think it's caused by them at all. I think it's, unfortunately, we've got a lot of monopolies in certain spaces. So one of the challenges that you've got is that the managed service provider for NNS, Co-op, and for Jaguar, it's all TCS. Does everyone know that? And so we've got like a really serious concentrated risk around certain vendors and managed service providers. And there's got to be a bit of a question about also, are we also in those spaces facing that's native that we challenging us to start with
The M&S have changed very rapidly.
reputational damages with the company.
Yeah.
So we'll always kind of say, if something happened to HMRC's IT systems, it wouldn't be our IT suppliers that would get it in their neck, it would be HMRC.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and people miss that point, I think, that's the crux of the matter, is that organisations often don't manage their third parties or fourth parties very well. And they think that that's by outsourcing stuff, they can probably do it a bit cheaper and actually just not have to pay much attention to it, because it's their problem to do it. But it's only their problem to do it
risk
to the contract. So this cybersecurity resilience bill that I think will be probably go to Parliament sometime in the next weeks or month or so. About it ever since it came out that is now finally going to include managed service providers. They've all come into the bill about that. And yeah, long time coming. Sorry, we better press on. So, anyone here still use IS 1 and 2? Anyone recognise the term? No. Yes, there's always someone. Yeah, I've just been finishing off the final updates to a set of RMATs for systems that we do. And it's the old style RMAT, so it's yay, you know. And we still do IS 1 and 2 in it. But this will be the last year we do, we switch to the new style SMP thing. Yeah. So, but the interesting thing is that to do that properly, you have to go through lists of potential threat actors. Now, who are the people who are trying to attack us? What's their motivation? And how skilled are they? What's their capability? And by getting that sort of broad brush understanding about, you know, who is it we're trying to defend ourselves against and why, you can then start to build in some layers of controls that mitigate those risks. But getting to those risks in the first place is those three questions. Who is it? Why are they doing it? And how skilled are they? And I don't think, you know, it's an old way of doing it, but for me, it's actually still quite valid. And if you're going to get into threat hunting and all the rest of it, then you still need to have that basic underpinning understanding of who are we defending ourselves against. And of course, it's all sorts of folks. So it's, you know, state and non-state sponsored. There's the four usual candidates there: China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. The cyber criminals. There's insider threat. Increasingly these days, we see problems with, you know, cheesed off individuals who just want to take a pop at you. And because they've got privileged access into all sorts of stuff, then it's relatively easy for them to do it. So keeping your employees actually feeling quite good about what they do is quite important. What else have we got? Oh, let's not even get into AI tonight, because AI is just going to change all sorts of stuff for us, isn't it? That's going to change the whole. People who actually aren't very skilled all of a sudden can just go and do stuff that they would never have been able to do. They get some help from AI. Bit on strike, it'll show you better. Let's move on. I just came across this the other day. It's sort of loosely related. According to the ICO, students are behind 57% of personal data breaches in schools. Quite a big number. And I just thought that was interesting, and I wish that somehow we could turn that around. And you know, kids and students are quite inquisitive. If we can channel them properly, then they're our defence down the line. I do worry a little bit about the advent of AI and the fact that all of the people who want to go into cyber security roles as tier one analysts, if you will, you know, they're going to be replaced by the AI tools. We don't need level one cybersecurity analysts anymore, because we've got AI tools to do all that stuff for us. But then where are we going to get the level 2 and the level 3 next year and next decade? So we really need to think about this stuff. Let's move on. if you please. So what's the government doing? I've mentioned this cyber security and resilience bill. It's definitely imminent. It's I'm part of an all-party parliamentary group that gets invited to go talk about these things periodically. Yeah, good. It's sort of our equivalent of NIS2 with a bit of Dora flung in, but because we're no longer EU, we can't just do the same as they've done. We've got to do something different. So this will be it. It is definitely focused on CNI and their critical third parties. But it will make a difference. It will introduce reporting requirements, 24-hour reporting for security incidents with 72 hours for the whole thing. You know, you need to tell us all you know within 72 hours, but you need to tell us at least enough within 24 hours or becoming aware. It's the usual thing of becoming aware. And then we had a couple of we had a webinar just last week, I think, by a couple of folks from DSIT who were involved in these two new codes of practice that they just launched. And they're quite good. They really are genuinely quite good, but they're voluntary. It takes us back to the beginning, doesn't it? You know, for as long as organisations and boards want to stick their head in the sand, well, they ain't going to sign up to these things. None of it's going to cost them money, and they're not really very interested. So, how on earth do we turn all that stuff around? But they're doing a lot more as well. This APPG is run by a guy called Dan Aldrich. He's the MP for Weston-super-Mare, which is a place I probably never thought I'd be visiting in my lifetime. But it turns out I'm speaking there next week or the week after. Because does anyone go to the B-sides things that pop up around the country, the sort of security gatherings? Well, Weston-super-Mare, because they're on the coast, they want to do a B-sides version of it. So I'm going to talk about the Weston-super-Mare Seasides, things on the third. And this guy is the MP for Weston-super-Mare, but he's also the BCS, ex-BCS head of policy. And he does get it. So I can't think of anyone better to be chairing an APPG on cyber innovation than this fella, because he sort of understands the problems. And there is a lot more going on. Yes, please.
Sorry, can I just ask you?
Yeah.
You mentioned twice now D6.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether people know what that is,
Oh,
because it's
sorry.
relatively new.
And anyone,
Yeah.
Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. Yeah.
It was part of GDS that's moved,
Yeah.
government digital services that moved into their own department. So
Apologies.
it's so new.
Yeah. And it's too easy to do that, isn't it? Because you just drop into apologies. So this bill is imminent. It's going to increase the scope. It's going to include managed service providers and cloud and SaaS vendors, and data centers will come into scope, and their third parties that support critical services. We've got this 24-hour reporting with a 72-hour follow-up. They're going to be setting the minimum security standard against a new version of the cyber assessment framework under NCSC. So the bar is gradually going up, but bear in mind this is only for critical national infrastructure. If you're another organisation that it doesn't fall into one of those 14 sectors, then it's kind of your choice. You do it if you want to, if you think it's relevant, if it's going to protect your organisation, or you can still be head on side. Which isn't great. This is interesting. We're going to have government power through secondary legislation to just act against emerging threats. Nobody really knows what that means just yet. However, I do believe that it is a solid start at making an improvement, and hopefully it will kind of start to trickle down. And you know, people say never waste a good crisis. I'm not a fan of the never waste a good crisis mentality, if I'm honest. I don't really like it. It's smacks of, you know, bandwagons and stuff. I would say we should learn from a crisis. Absolutely, we should always try and learn from a crisis, but we should never waste or ignore a series of crises, and that seems to be what's going on at the moment, is that we're getting crisis after crisis after crisis. And eventually we get to some sort of critical mass where organisations eventually, you know, who haven't been caught yet, might jump to the conclusion that they could get caught next week if they're going to do something, or next month, or next year. And they could be that 158-year-old business that's got these big contract because they can't survive it, because they haven't put enough time and effort into building and protecting their IT systems. That's what it's all about.
So can I ask what your perception of the nature of the risk assessments that key organisations are undertaking? So it strikes me that most, and a lot, the phrase has been used in this room, I think, in this debate already, is really around bottom line. And clearly that will motivate most corporate organisations.
Yeah.
But most corporate organisations are tied in an integrated fashion into providing critical national infrastructure. But there is no requirement, obligation, certainly nothing backed up in law, that requires them to be good corporate citizens.
No.
So if the motivation is effectively internalised for that organisation, it will always be around bottom line.
Yeah.
They will never get the point unless they really analyse their supply chain. That it's not just them, it's not just their sector, it's the economy as a whole, which gets us back to where Jason was coming in around what is government's role in that.
Yeah.
And I would argue that in a sense, government's role is probably to let something fail. Up to a point, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
Because that will then hopefully reset people's perception of where they sit in the country.
Yeah, totally.
And what role they perform.
And I think there's a, as with all of these things, I think there's a balance to be struck somewhere. I do think that this thing could be stronger in a number of areas. I do believe that boards should be mandated to have someone who is accountable for information security within their organisation, actually accountable for it. And I do believe that boards should be made to report on it, probably 6 monthly or annually within their company reports, on the state of risk, information security, cyber security risks within their organisation.
What size of organisation?
Well, that's the big question. Yeah, so if you're a small organisation, you have other people.
Don't you have?
So that's where you start. Yeah, and there's two approaches to it, I think. You can take the risk-based approach and go down the 27,001 style routes, or IS 112s, and all the rest of it, whatever it is. But all of that forces you to understand your own risks and then determine what you need to do to reduce those risks to an acceptable level. The truth is, for most small organisations who aren't doing this stuff specifically, they just need a fairly standard set of sensible controls, like how do they control their passwords? How do they control their access management? How do they do updates to their software? Sounds a bit like Cyber Essentials, maybe. Yeah. So
wouldn't SMEs ever consider pulling together a cooperative?
they really should.
Because that's the answer.
Yeah.
Because because
Yeah.
you will never have the resources to
No.
do that.
No, and you won't have a specialist.
You have to set that forces on your own.
So this is where the MSPs come in.
It's being legislated, you must do this.
Yeah.
You can find someone saying you're doing their cash.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Yeah. So you both do it. So this is where the MSPs, I think, come in.
Yes.
But they have been largely unregulated, and you don't really know what you're buying, sort of thing. So, because there is no certification scheme for them. And I think that's one of the good things that this is doing, is bringing MSPs into scope. But I do think it could go a lot further. I think, reporting should be mandatory. So we're all sitting here talking about JLR. We don't really know what's happened. There are good reasons for not releasing too much information into the public domain, but across the sector, if they've been hit by someone this week, and the rest of the sector is at risk of a similar sort of attack, then that information should be securely shared within that sector, in my view. And we don't do that very well.
So about 20 years ago, it was, some of you may recall it, there was a massive tanker driver strike. That lasted probably about a week. And it's been turning over in my mind really, because, you know, what was about to happen is that Anglo, and therefore the economy, was about to stop during that incident. Don't think the tanker drivers knew that, because obviously did leverage. But that was what was going to happen, and it's always struck me, yeah, that's one of those things that government probably chose not to tell people. But should it have been out there in the public domain? Because it would possibly focus people's minds on contingency.
Yeah.
And it's the same argument with this really, around the secrecy of it.
Yeah.
It also comes down to, you know, commercially, what are people putting in their back-to-back service agreements around rights of knowledge both ways? Because if they're data controllers both ways, that needs to be backed up in contractual provisions, and it by and large isn't.
It's a tough one. I'm conscious of time.
You can carry on.
Okay,
Set the outlook for 10 minutes, because we've been doing a bit of Q&A.
Okay, brilliant. Oh, excellent. Yeah, good. So what's government doing? This is the Cyber Governance Code of Practice. It's backed up by it's a voluntary code, but it's backed up by a public pledge that organisations can sign up to. And of course, you know, if you're already bought into this stuff, then signing up to a public pledge to say you're going to conform to this Cyber Governance Code of Practice, you know, it's fine. You'll do it, but if you're not really bought into it at all, then this is not going to be very persuasive, and probably in the short term at least will just cause you a certain amount of exposure, because you're not doing it very well and you don't take it very seriously today. It's going to take you a while to get to that point. But I do think that there's some good stuff in it. There's quite risk areas, loads of actions and all the rest of it. Let's move on, shall we, Ian? This is the Software Security Code of Practice. That one came out in May. And again, it's quite good. Software is so ubiquitous these days, it's all over the place, isn't it? We've got AI writing software for us, sometimes quite good, sometimes not so good. If you just take stuff at face value when it comes out of an AI generating model, then hell into you if you just trust it. You know, it's like lawyers trusting what it tells them to go for. Hell into you if you take that to court and get found out. So it's not great. This will focus in on software vendors, the people who are designing code specifically for the systems that we rely on, the important stuff. Yeah. So software vendors, SaaS providers, vendors of goods and services, software components, software resellers, software developers. But it's not people who just do it for a hobby.
There's a lot of technical debt.
Oh, massive.
There.
Yeah.
So there are financial institutions out there that are running code that is 30 years old, never been recompiled.
No.
And it's
I know.
And it's open. It's almost.
Yeah. And all of the people who understood it have all retired.
Yes.
It's a massive
absolutely.
issue. Yeah.
And just to recompile it, they can't just recompile it onto the latest compiler, because those compilers have moved on from version 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, 6, 7, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it is hundreds of millions.
Yes.
And it's, the risk is we just let that banking system fail. And
Well, we
sort you out.
we replace it bit by bit by bit, but that's going to take as long as it took to get us to the point we're at today. Yeah, not good. Let's move on. Yeah, we've done that. Let's move on again. Thank you. We mentioned this. This is the inaugural meeting of this APPG for cyber innovation. It's doing good stuff. It influences the direction that these things take. Most of the folks that were at the meeting that I went to talk about this bill held the same view as myself and a number of the people in here, that actually it should be stronger, that we should be forcing organisations of a certain size in certain sectors, all the rest of it, you know, you can't drill this stuff out to everyone, but it does matter. And if we want our society to be secure, then we need to, IT is a utility these days. It's like the water and the gas. It's the way we often think about it. You know, it just has to be on. It has to be always on. So getting this stuff right is important. Yes, please.
So is there a regulator coming?
No, I don't think there is a regulator coming. I think they'll still rely on, you know, the ICO to really change into an information commission, which will be later this year. And then sector regulators. That seems to be the way of it. I don't think there's going to be a single regulator, but there will be an expectation of more reporting into the National Cybersecurity Centre, NCSC. So reporting of incidents will go that way. But as I said before, there's currently no requirement for organisations, larger organisations, say above 250, to report on information security risk. They don't have to put anything in their financial report. You just let it on with it. It's considered to be, coming back to your point, it's considered to be their risk, not society's risk. But this is CIPD, talked a little bit about this earlier. We need to recognise IT as a profession, like doctors, accountants. Yeah, we've done that, I think. This is a couple of slides that were sent to me by Russell Friend, who's put together this new CITP programme and is hoping it's going to be really successful. We could just move on into that, be okay. Yeah, keep going. So these are the new specialisms. The 4 blue ones are actually live now. This one is currently being thought about, and I think the yellow ones, if I remember rightly, are about to be launched. So CITP used to be a one-size-fits-all. It's not anymore. So if you've worked in a particular part of IT, you can get CITP for your specialism. I think is a good thing.
What's the red and black one?
I can't remember. I've got some notes on my slides, but okay, that's all off. I'll try and find out before I go. Well, there's a red one on there, isn't there? It doesn't come up on the screen. This one's red, isn't it?
That one's red in
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember. Yeah.
Just DevOps, UX design.
Yeah.
Nothing important.
And it's a simpler, more straightforward application process. And as I said before, they're turning them around in roughly 6 weeks. So that's good. What about organisations? We're doomed. We're all doomed. That recognition that security is an enterprise risk for me is the starting point for all of these things. You know, you need to consider risk. If you're a large organisation and you're considering, you know, all of the other risks, financial risk, health and safety risk, what the hell isn't information security in there? Your IT systems underpin everything that your organisation does, even if you're a truck firm delivering stuff. You can't do it without your IT systems that you put in to make you more efficient, more streamlined, enable you to do more stuff quicker. But they go down and you go back to pen and paper. Yeah, you've forgotten how to do that. You haven't got the forms that you used to use. You haven't got a stock of pens and pencils. Nobody uses them these days. You know, simple stuff.
Is this the point of talking about data that's already been harvested?
Can do.
And security and
can do.
We don't have huge power today to work out what's going on in those packets of information that are out there, that are stored, that have been siphoned off, but quantum's coming.
Quantum is coming.
Quantum on demand will make that information available.
So the harvest now, decrypt later problem is real. I think, you know, there's just so much data, it'll need to be targeted. So it'll be targeted on those data sets that people are interested in, but we don't know what they are.
Know which systems have been
breached. No, we don't.
To siphon that data.
No, we don't.
Until they start using it.
Until it turns up in the dark web or somewhere.
Wherever that is.
Yeah, wherever it is. Key point, I keep coming back to it. This is not an IT problem, and too many organisations still think that it is, and it's the IT team's problem to keep everything running. It's just not. It's a business problem. it's an absolute business problem, so it has to be included in the business strategy, it has to be led by the board, otherwise it's absolutely doomed to fail. Because the IT guys won't have the time, the money, the resource, the skill, all of the things that they need to do this stuff properly. Please. I mean, I'm a fan of 27001, been doing it a long time. Clause 5, if you know the thing, talks about leadership and commitment, and for me, that's where all of this starts in any organisation that wants to take it seriously. And if it's not driven from the top, it just becomes a hobby for the guys who are doing it, and they will just forever complain that they haven't got the money and the time and the resources and tools and all the other things that they need. They can't get the training because there's no budget for it, because the board haven't taken it very seriously. So for me, all of these things are still vital, but they start with this.
Can I just,
Yeah.
I've been bursting to say this all night. But a lot of the sort of disparate things like sort of human aspect and technical controls and, you know, is all embraced by 27. And, you know, and particularly for companies who say are not necessarily a cyber company or an information security company.
Yeah.
You know, when you take on a framework like 27, it brings you up to that, educates you, and enables you to put in multi-layers of controls.
Yes.
And focuses you on risk assessment and all that stuff. And what's also interesting is that when we're in this new era of AI, you're actually still applying the same things like data classification.
Yeah.
Which is so important in the world of AI.
It's the starting point for all of this stuff, and there's a new standard. There's a new standard just come out for AI management systems, 42001.
Yeah.
And it's built in exactly the same way as this. So if you're doing 27001,
so many more companies did 27.
Yeah. Agree.
It would be such a much better job.
You know, some organisations think it's a really scary thing to do. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
You know, you build it to meet your own company's size, shape, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lovely. So understanding your risks, once you've got that leadership commitment, going back to my conversation with our CEO at the time, Kevin, when he said, I don't really understand this stuff, but I know that it's really important to us. We have to get this right, otherwise we can't build this business. We've got 3 or 4 initial clients, we've got 160 or more these days. And they're financial services organisations, government departments, that you'll know them all, you recognise them all, and they simply wouldn't trust us with their data unless they knew that we were taking the stuff seriously. That doesn't mean that you always get everything right all the time, but there's a commitment there. And doing 27,001 is actually a really good place to start. If you're not big enough, then actually Cyber Essentials is a good place to start. You're a small organisation, and again, you can work your way up to it. You can start with the Cyber Essentials, the basic one, before you go on to Cyber Essentials Plus, which is assessed externally. You can do a self-assessment on it, and then set yourself out a roadmap and see some steady improvements. And each one of those improvements will reduce your risk, whether you're thinking of it from a risk perspective or, you know, what, you're just sensible security controls that I should be putting in. It's a really good place to start smaller organisations. And then there's plenty of other things. This is CAF, I think. This is NIST cybersecurity framework, which was revised, I think, earlier this year, and now includes governance where it never used to. So they all pretty much interlock these days. They really do. We've got people doing this thing to develop a cyber workforce of the future, with qualifications, with certifications, with professional recognition and pathways, and all of that good stuff that we've been talking about. I think we've covered pretty much all of that already somewhere along the line. So thank you very much. Oh yeah, get yourself a CISO. You haven't got one, you need one. I would say that, wouldn't I? Oh, I don't care. But you know what? This is a CISO mind map. If you've never come across it, if you search on the web for the CISO mind map, this is why I say information security is just a little bit more than cyber security, because that bit there is, to my mind, the cyber security bit. these are all the other things that CISO is responsible for. And these are the things that this guy thinks CISO should be focusing on this year. Securing Gen AI. Well, that sounds trivial, doesn't it? Consolidate and rationalize your security tools. Some organizations do dozens of them. Identify and manage security debt. Ransomware and cyber resilience. There was a point a couple of years ago where people thought ransomware was starting to diminish. It is not. It just isn't. Create meaningful metrics, improve your cyber hygiene. Get the basics, do them right, do them well, and that will stand you in good stead. And then this fella here, this person here, this guy or this gal, needs to be able to translate from IT language, technical language into board language. They need to be able to talk about the organization risk to the board in a language that they will understand. They're not interested in DDoS. They're interested in what will happen to them if one of those nasty attacks that they've heard of happens. What will be the implications for my business? What can I still do? What can I no longer do? How long will it last? And then translate that into some financial defense form. I don't think they exist anymore. Brilliant, thank you. Nearly there, I think. So the language bit matters. That's the point I was just making. They care about return on investment. They care about impact on the business and the bottom line. Coming back to that point, they don't really care about ransomware and patching. They're not interested. So I think that's almost it, isn't it? I think it was 28 in the pack. The last one's just so. This looks like the last one. Yeah. Converting those risk conversations into budget. But I've seen too many times where individuals in some sort of security role within an organization inflate everything. They go for the fear, uncertainty, and doubt route of getting money, scare it out of them, and they'll give you some money so that I can go buy some new toys. It's not really how it works, folks. You need to articulate it in language that the board will understand, so that they can understand that business impact. They can understand how likely it really is, and that's hard. Risk calculations and likelihoods. It's all a bit like that, isn't it? Because if it's never happened to you yet, the guys on the board are just going to say, well, it's never happened yet. Why is it going to happen tomorrow? Well, look out there where it's happening all over the place, and if we don't do at least some of this stuff and do it reasonably well, then it's just a matter of time.
So what are all the stats?
What are the stats and the metrics that you need to build in?
What are the stats that, what's the government perspective in terms of it's probably getting worse, is it?
I don't know that it's 100 times worse. I don't know what the actual numbers are, but it's well worth downloading and reading the 2025 risk register. There's a UK risk register, and cyber appears in it all over the place these days. It's a worthy read, and it's only started creeping into that. I think maybe this year or last year was the first time they actually published it as a UK risk register. I'm looking forward to seeing the next one to see and to do that comparison, to join the dots, but you've got all of the rising incident reports and all of the rest that you can consult to see how the threats and the incidents are escalating year on year on year, because they just are. And we've mentioned it before, AI is just going to accelerate that. We're going to get into a war of AI, the defenders on one side, the attackers on the other. That's how AI will go through the roof. We'll all have to buy it, otherwise we won't survive it. Horrible.
Sorry, I was just saying, how do you combat the unknown?
Yeah, I don't know. How do you combat the unknown? The only way that I can see that you can sensibly combat the unknown is by doing all of the things that we do, which is understanding risk, but it's not a static thing. Risk is never a static thing. So you need to be constantly reviewing risks and threats. Working with your peer group, working with other organisations in the same sector. So, you know, it has to be a collaborative thing. You can't do it in isolation. There's no way you can do information security in isolation these days.
So it's like following principles, good practice.
Yes, yeah. And embed it around the whole company.
You can still be vulnerable.
Of course, yeah, you don't know what you don't know from spell.
There's also, I think, something going on, which is there is quite a lot of stasis in the way analysis is performed. So people like their routine, so like the way they've done it for the last 10 years of working out where the threat is. They don't like changing their routine. Managers don't like hearing that we want to try this new idea. With the younger, more adept data scientists, my view would be give them their head, they'll come up with better ways of looking at the problem. Keep letting them do it, because that at least keep you up with what's going on in the sector in terms of, let's say, counter fraud. Might not stop IT vulnerabilities, but it might help you prevent or at least understand what's leaking out.
You get controversial again.
Sure.
So it could be viewed like a spin jam. You know what's out there, so we're going to prevent it. We don't know what's coming this winter.
Yeah. Yes.
So you're always protecting yourself from what's happened previously.
Yeah, because all you've got to go on is history.
Yeah.
None of us can predict the future, but you know we can set ourselves up. The watchword for this year is resilience. So whatever you can reasonably anticipate might happen, just make sure you've got a plan for it. Don't wait till it happens and then create the plan. Do that thinking beforehand. Yeah, get some resilience built into your organisation so that you've got processes that you can fall back on. They might not be perfect, they might not be as good, but they might stop us under.
Is this not where also layering comes in?
Sure.
So, you know, so you don't quite know what the controls are going to do. They're all good best practice, but the fact that you've got all these controls, be it right from the employee, education, phishing, and then you carrying on going down. You've got your playbooks or whatever it is, and it's just you don't quite know when they're going to come in. But the fact is, you've got
hopefully one of those is going to stop and get to the next layer.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah,
exactly that. Yeah, layer security. It's a great concept. I think that's me.
Yeah,
25 minutes.
Yeah, and there is
Thanks so much for that.
question.
I'm sorry. I think we've got one question somewhere.
Yeah.
What's your view in the incorporation of zero architecture?
It's another decision when you're architecting a system to, it's genuinely not a new thing. Something that we've been doing for many years and given that a name. But the basic tenet of it is very strong, and the more you can build that in, so zero plus architecture. You can only talk to what you're allowed to talk to, nothing else. And it's a great technical and design control, and more organizations are doing it. And actually cloud facilitates it quite nicely. Yeah.